I don't know, for some reason, when someone asks me what my favorite book is, my mind instantly goes blank and malfunctions, and the only resounding thoughts in my head are white noise. Hi Beats, it's EKG. Welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Ebony, but I like to go by EKG, which is my pen name. And today I will be talking about my favorite books. But before we get into that, I hope you're doing well today. I hope you are staying hydrated. Today I'm going to be talking about my favorite books, the books that I would take with me onto a deserted island, the books that if someone said to me, you can only read kind of books for the rest of your life and nothing else new, which books would I choose and pick? So the first book that I want to talk about that I read this year in 2021 that has me in an absolute chokehold is none other than Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. Like I said, I read this year, and ever since I read it, I have not been able to stop thinking about it. Conversations with Friends follows a young woman named Frances, and it chronicles her relationship with a married man named Nick, as well as her best friend Bobby. So we get insight into those relationships, as well as Frances's inner monologues about life and about struggling and trying to find her voice and find herself in a world as a young 20-something university student, which I thought was brilliantly done. I highly related to that aspect of Frances, and she is very, very intelligent, very smart, very keen. I love the conversations as well in this novel around classism and sexism, which have a direct correlation in a way to Frances's relationship with Nick, because he is wealthy, he has access to resources, and Frances is a starving college student. This story was very layered, and also it just speaks to the part of my brain in which I love narratives centering on writers. I don't know, okay? Maybe I fall into the cliche of a writer loving to read about writing. Sally Rooney is a masterclass in writing herself, and this book was a joy to read in the sense of really exploring the many ways human intimacy and human connections are expressed. Okay, so following along the lines of me enjoying books that center on characters' inner monologue and how they interpret or interact with the world around them, and how possibly their social economic status impacts that and their race impacts that. One of my favorite books is Heads of the Colored People by Nafissa Thompson-Spires. This is a collection of short stories that does exactly what it says on the title. It gets into the heads of Black main characters in many different settings, in a variety of settings. The first short story in here, for instance, surrounds a young Black man who is very much into anime and just the different modes of Blackness and Black expression, which I was really into. And it explores how gender, race, and class have an impact on the characters, as well as possibly disability statuses. There is a story on here centering on the narrative of character with a disability, so I just thought that was very interesting, and we really just get into the heads of these characters. Nafissa Thompson-Spires' writing is also very witty. It almost feels electric at times because the prose moves in such a way that really handles the duality of having to accurately portray in a fiction setting what people in real life go through, as well as maintaining and grounding her characters in a world that is very similar to our own. So that's why I really enjoyed this short story collection. I have a love-hate relationship with short story collections, but this is probably one of the best ones that I've ever read. You cannot go wrong. Okay, so a book that I read not too long ago that I have not stopped thinking about as well, and is probably one of my favorite books, and you'll see why. We are recognizing a theme here in the types of books that I like. and that is Luster by Leilani. And Luster follows Eddie, who is a young 20-something Black woman living in New York City. She is an inspiring artist, painter, drawer, and she is currently working in the publishing industry. And she becomes involved in a relationship with a man who has an open marriage. And once again, we are getting into how socioeconomic statuses impact people, and as well as really delving into the inner monologue of a character who feels seemingly alienated from society or is having a hard time finding her place in society. And that's exactly how I would describe Eddie, the main character of this novel. She is struggling with the adjustment of entering adulthood, trying to find herself while also trying to still follow her passion of being an artist, and juggling having to work a 9-to-5 and having resources, access to resources. And that's what this explores. A lot of the writings, I've seen criticisms of Luster, and people say that the story feels somewhat unrealistic, and I do agree with that, but I think that's also the point. Like, I think it just is a character analysis on the lengths that a character like Eddie, a person like Eddie, would go through to obtain a sense of security. So that's why I enjoyed this. This is also has to deal with an artist, like I'm saying, so it's a theme of mine. I like reading about main characters who are like this. I don't know, it could be the angst, it could be the artistic angst, the artistic frustration, as well as my own grapplings with all of these subjects. Okay, to kind of break this up, I want to mention a book that is listed as an essay collection, and that is Bluets by Maggie Nelson. I really enjoyed Bluets because it borders the line of poetry. In my opinion, Maggie Nelson's writing is very poetic, the prose is very poetic, and Bluets is essentially a number of short sentences, paragraphs, or stories surrounding Maggie Nelson's love, disdain, hate, fascination with the color blue. I know you're thinking, Ebony, why would I want to read about a lady talking about the color blue for 95 pages about? And I would say to you, it's because she talks about the color blue in a way that reflects what's going on in her life at the time. She has a friend who is gravely ill, and she talks about how blue is often painted as a color of depression or sadness. And then she also relates to the color blue in terms of pleasure and intimacy, and how it is a happy color as well, like sky blue. So I just thought that was fascinating. I also have a thing for writers and people who do or experiment with form to express and relate and view things in a way that we don't normally view them in everyday life. I think that's pretty awesome. So that's what I really enjoyed about Bluets. I know you're probably sitting here watching this whole video waiting for me to mention this book, but here it is. On Earth We Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. Oh my god, this is probably my favorite fiction book of all time, and let me tell you why. So, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous is a collection of letters written from the perspective of the main character, the narrator, Little Dog, as he chronicles his life growing up in America as a Vietnamese immigrant. And he is writing the letters to his mother, who does not know how to read English. So he really bears all in the narrative, and he just details key aspects of their life and how it shaped and informed him, as well as dealing with PTSD from the Vietnam War and how intergenerational trauma kind of weaves itself into his life. And I just thought that this story was so good. Ocean Vuong's writing in this is insane, okay? It is insane. There's not much plot, which I'm okay with, but if you wow me with the writing, with the characters, I'm like, yep, 5 stars, favorite book of all time. I'm a simple girl to please, and On Earth We Briefly Gorgeous does that for me. You can truly see the intention and the precision in which Ocean Vuong crafts his words, his sentences, his stories, everything feels super purposeful, which is what I highly appreciated. As an aspiring writer myself, I just appreciate the craft that went into this book and the intent that went into this book. Nothing feels thrown together, nothing feels like it shouldn't be there, and that's what I love to see. And the story was just very beautiful, very heartbreaking, but also very hopeful. And that's what I think is the most beautiful thing about it. If you have not read any of Ocean Vuong's work, please do so. Okay, so transitioning, I'll mention another memoir that I really enjoyed, and that is When Breath Becomes Air. So When Breath Becomes Air is about Paul's life. We get introduced to Paul when he's younger. He has a love for literature as well as for science, which same. And we just follow his life as he is studying. He studies English. At one point he gets a master's in English, and then he decides to go to medical school where he wants to become a neurosurgeon. And for Paul, he is fascinated by the human mind, what makes us human, the things that physically and metaphysically compose our human experience. And yeah, this book just speaks to me on that level. Eventually we learn that he gets hit with a diagnosis of cancer, so that's a trigger warning. If that is a sensitive topic for you, just know that going into this book, because you will be absolutely wrecked by it. I loved every minute of it. I loved the interweaving of literature with science, as well as this more broader philosophical questionings of why we are here experiencing life on a floating rock, which is what I wonder every day. Okay, so I think one of the last books I'm going to mention is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. Now, Where the Crawdads Sing, character Kaya Clark is alienated from society. She has somewhat of a troubled, or a very troubled, childhood experience where she ends up living on her own as a young girl. Being alienated from society, she just really delves herself into the environment of the marshlands. She knows every species, every single aspect of the marsh, which I thought was phenomenal. I am a big nature girl, okay? Although spiders scare me, anything with more than like 6 legs I'm not a fan of. So although those things terrify me, I just think there's something so beautiful and so quiet and reflective about nature that I'm obsessed with, and this book delivers that to me, as well as sprinkling in a murder mystery, which is also very good for my brain because I like trying to solve things in books, as well as we get some poetry in here as well. There's romance. I mean, this book delivers. You know, it delivers everything that is on my box of requirements for me to become obsessed with something. I'll just briefly talk about Open Water by Caleb Azumah Nelson. I just mentioned this in my 2K Q&A video, so I won't go too much into detail about why I love it. But it also centers on the love story of 2 young black creatives, a young man who is a photographer and a woman who is a dancer. And like I'm saying, we get those intergenerational traumas interweaved into socioeconomic issues and how all of that manifests itself into the lives of the characters. I'm very much into kind of like taking macroscopic issues and bringing them down to the microscopic everyday, day-to-day life. So that's it. Those are all of the books I'm going to mention as my favorite books. Let me know if you've read any of these books, if you love them, if you hated them, if you hate me now for recommending them. And yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at ekgwriting. It's linked down below, as well as my Goodreads, so you can check me out on there as well. I appreciate each and every one of you for rocking with me today and making it to the end of the video. And I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!
And I was like, yo.